What's up guys, and welcome back to another video, and today we're going over 10 things Marvel wants you to forget about Thor. And let's get straight on the list with number 10, Loki stealing Thor's hammer. In the terrible vengeance of Loki, the supervillain does not do what the title states. Loki is banned from Earth by Odin, but with the awful security on Asgard, Loki is able to sneak his way to spy on Donald Blake. By doing this, he figures out that Blake needs the hammer in order to turn into Thor. With this knowledge, Loki lures him into the par and the two begin to fight. Loki then uses Jane Foster as bait and makes Thor choose whether to save her or catch his hammer. Choosing Jane, the god loses the hammer to Loki and ultimately becomes Donald Blake once again. Finally, Loki is able to roam freely and cause chaos, but he doesn't. Instead, he turns buildings into candy and cars to ice cream. He also makes bystanders invisible. How evil! Marvel probably wants us to forget about this non-threatening version of Loki and keep our thoughts on the one that could destroy the world. Number 9, Thor had 2 goat sidekicks. It's pretty common for superheroes to have sidekicks, but Thor took it at a new level. He had 2 pet goats as his helpers. First showing up in 1976, Thor Annual number 5 introduced Tooth Gnasher and Tooth Grinder, 2 flying goats that pulled the god in a chariot when entering battle. They were mystical goats that could travel at fast speeds and take good amounts of damage. If they were ever eaten for some reason, they had the ability to be reborn again and again, only if their bones were not broken. Not much is seen with these 2 animals anymore, and definitely have not appeared pulling Chris Hemsworth anywhere. But the premieres of the 2 mythical creatures pulling around our hero is something both interesting and lame at the same time. Marvel probably wants us to forget about this and just think about how cool Thor looks flying around with the help of his hammer. Number 8, Thor was once a part of Thorian. This was another byproduct of the not too successful amalgam mashup of the Marvel and DC universes. In an attempt to re-spark comic book interest in a time when the 2 industry giants were running out of steam, a whole lot of subpar mashups were created. In this specific example, we see the Norse god mixed with the DC hero, Orion. While this new hero certainly wasn't the worst thing to come out of the mediocre mashups, as he did become the protector of the new Asgard for thousands of years, he was still part of some of the least inspired comics to ever be made. He spent most of his time fighting Thanos' who was, you guessed it, a mashup of Thanos and Darkseid. While like I stated previously this wasn't terrible, a lot of people couldn't take the concept all too serious. Number 7, Mjolnir wasn't his first weapon. Thor's iconic piece is an impressive hammer that he wields around when fighting evil, so it's hard to imagine what it would be like without it. But in the past, Thor carried a different weapon. He used Jorn. I don't know if I said that right. If I didn't, then let me know in the comments below. A gigantic axe that was strong enough to cut through virtually anything. It also has the ability to deflect intense energy blasts. Unable to lift the hammer when he was younger, Thor would use Jorn up to the 11th century when he fought Apocalypse and inevitably lost it. Considering how long he was attached to the weapon, it was quite the loss. Number 6, Donald Blake as Thor. Whether you follow the MCU or simply know about the Norse mythology, you probably know that there isn't really a secret identity for Thor to keep. After all, he's a god. Unlike Iron Man, Captain America, or Spider-Man, there is no alter ego for Thor, but there used to be. Thor originally had an origin story in which Dr. Donald Blake found Mjolnir, the famous hammer. Blake found it on top of a mountain, and when he needed to, he could transform into the almighty Thor. Obviously, this story didn't stick, and the writers rewrote it so he was Thor the entire time and forgot. It's a long story, but it doesn't even matter because Thor is Thor and has always been Thor. Marvel definitely wants us to forget about Donald Blake and just think that the son of Odin has always been our hero. Number 5, Thor was stupid. You would think being a superhero would force you to be extremely careful with your powers because they could kill anyone at any moment. Well, not Thor. Even though he's a god, he doesn't seem to know how physics work. In the Avengers movie, we see him strike Captain America's shield, causing many viewers to be disappointed with the poor writing, as the powerful hammer should have killed Captain America. Even in the comics, Thor is careless with his godly strength. When the Avengers finished thawing out Captain America's body, Thor tried to kill him with Mjolnir, and get this, they were in a submarine. He also seemed to fall in every trap that was set for him, along with having no common sense when it comes to being a smart superhero. I guess Marvel had to do something to balance out the fact that he's a god with powers from another world. Number 4, Thor fights a medieval wizard. As with any hero, somewhere along the line, he had to fight a pathetic villain. In the comics, Merlin is awoken when his tomb is uncovered and disturbed, and apparently he's after power. His first move is to head towards Washington, D.C. to oust the president, but is predictably confronted by Thor. Everything about this villain is ridiculous. First, taking a look at his wardrobe. He sports long hair and a massive brown beard, as well as an absurd green cloak and a pointy hat with golden stars. This also doesn't mix well with his backstory, having allegedly been put into a magical coma during the Middle Ages. It's hard to believe anyone at the time looked like a bad cosplay of Mickey Mouse in Fantasia. This, mixed with the fact that he had no real character development, makes him a villain who honestly just comes off as stupid. Number 3, Thor was once a frog. Loki, Thor's brother and the trickster god, has always been pretty good at living up to his title. During one of his schemes in the mighty Thor, Loki used magic to turn Thor into a frog. Despite the physical change, Thor maintained his mind and some of his powers, which he utilized in the ensuing battle in Central Park between rats and frogs. Of course, the god of thunder eventually emerged victorious over his brother and returned to his normal form. This adventure was not completely lost, however, as he gifted a shard of his hammer for one of his frog friends, who would use it to join the Pet Avengers under the name of Throg. While the story seems whimsical and cute, it strayed from the menacing figure of a towering Norse god, making this likely a reason why Marvel wants us to forget about it. Number 2, Thor once helped Hitler. For being a part of a team that was meant to stand for justice in the world, this seems like a pretty strange way of doing it. The rest of the invaders discovered Thor's actions in the 33rd installment of their self-titled comic series, when they uncover his plan to assist in the assassination of Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. When this plan fails, Thor uses his mighty hammer to facilitate the defeat to the leader of the Third Reich, which makes this relationship feel even more uncomfortably personal. Thor does eventually feel remorse for his murder plot, but is this the type of thing that a quick sorry can really make up for? Being quite possibly the most notorious and globally hated figures in recent history, it's no wonder why Marvel doesn't like to remind us about Thor and Hitler's ties. We can almost guarantee we won't be seeing anything like this on the big screen anytime soon. And number 1, Thor nuked China. This was certainly a product of the time it was created in. This story comes from the comic Mystery number 63, during a time when America was in the midst of its all-out push to stop communism and fight all those who were for it. That's probably the reason why such a story was allowed to be published, as it was riding a wave of nationalism instead of considering how absurd the plot actually was. After stopping the communist, radioactive man who was sent by China to attack New York, Thor decides to send him back to where he came from. Creating a tornado, he flew the villain back to the Chinese mainland, knowing full well that this would cause a radioactive man to detonate. Though this might seem reasonable at the time due to the intense rivalry with communist China, looking back, it seems rather morally irresponsible for a superhero to be willing to nuke a whole country. And that is it for the video, guys. As always, thanks for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at Valenplana, and I'll see you all later.